The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? We're excited to have you here today with us. This is going to be a lot of fun today. I'm really excited to give this presentation. It's one of my favorite ones that I do, and really excited to see so many people with us today. Thank you all for joining. From a Mountain State side, I'm flying a little bit solo today, so we'll just go ahead and hurry and get started. A lot of information I want to get through, and excited to share it all with you. So. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Jason Allen. I'm a licensed engineer. I graduated with my bachelor's and master's degrees in water resource engineering from the University of Utah. I also have 18 years of experience in the engineering field. Started out surveying, worked in land development, worked as the Morgan County engineer in the public sector, was a consultant engineer, and did mostly drainage and roadway projects. Started my own company a couple of times, and I now am a marketing engineer for the Mountain States Concrete Pipe Association. For those of you who are unfamiliar with Mountain States Concrete Pipe Association and what we do, we have 4 different member companies that I do want to recognize today. I want to recognize Geneva Pipe and Precast, that is now a Northwest Pipe Company. Some of you would be familiar with Heather and Mike Blackham, who have been on the call with us in weeks past. We also have Old Castle Infrastructure. Many of you have known Randy. Randy and I gave a presentation last week together about box culverts. And so we want to recognize Old Castle Infrastructure and Geneva Pipe and Precast. We also want to give a shout out to Ash Grove and Wholesome, who are our cement suppliers. We're really excited to have them with us. They are great folks, and we're excited for all the stuff that they do, and happy and appreciative of what they do for our association and the feedback that they provide us. So we now are moving into what we call the Pajama Presentation, and those of you that have been attending each week know that this is a presentation that I love to do every week in my pajamas because I work from home. So the purposes, threefold purposes, to help you build some technical skill and give you some skills. Today is more of a soft skill training on giving presentations to those non-technical folks. Also to hopefully provide you a break during your day so that you can just relax and have fun and enjoy something. Hopefully we can entertain you a little bit and help you have a good time. And also, this helps my need to be the center of attention in all that I do. So that is very important for me. I love being the center of attention. Anyway, so last week, if you tuned in, we did not post a picture of my pajamas. We've done that every week up to this point. So I decided to show you last week's pajamas, and I'm wearing them. I washed them, don't worry, but I'm wearing them again today. These are my Anchor jammy pants and my Lakers baseball 3/4 sleeve and my Lakers baseball hat. I coach a bunch of different baseball teams. You may be saying, well, Jason, why are you so sad? You look so unhappy and sad. Well, that's because I'm not convinced we're ever going to play baseball ever again because of this pandemic. So the governor lifted a few restrictions yesterday, but still said no games. So we're still not able to play. So I'm very, very sad. But anyways, I coach a lot of baseball ages 8 to 13 right now. We have 5 different teams. All of them will be Bonneville Lakers if they decide to continue to play through high school. So this is my me giving a shout out to my Bonneville peeps and all my players. And I'm just wanted them to know how sad I am that I'm not coaching and playing baseball right now. Anyway, 3 takeaways today that we're going to discuss and talk about. And I have a lot of information that I want to get through. And I'm hoping that this will be of great value to some of you who do, or all of you that are doing presentations to people that don't have a really strong technical background. Okay. The first one is we need to know our audience. What are we doing to get to know them and to learn about our audience? Okay. The next one would be storytelling. All right. We're going to talk about the fine art of telling stories. All right. And we're going to discuss a Dale Carnegie principle that I learned called evidence defeats doubt. Okay. Now, before we jump too far into this, I just want to do some housekeeping items. Keep in mind this is being recorded. If there's any part of this that you are impressed by and that you want more information on, this will be uploaded to our YouTube channel later this afternoon or early evening. You can just go to YouTube and search Mountain States Concrete Pipe Association, and it'll bring up our channel and all of the previous webinars that we've given on Fridays. All of our pajama presentations are available on there. so that you can go and watch those at any time that you want. So remember that those are there and you can see those there. We will be doing some poll questions today. I have 5 different poll questions if we have time to get to them. And what we learned last week is that some people are not able to vote in the polls because they're in full screen mode. So if when we put the polls up, if you minimize your screen instead of being in full screen mode, if you take it out of full screen mode, you can then vote. For whatever reason, this program, if it's in full screen, it locks out your ability to vote in those. So make sure when I bring those poll questions up that you're out of full screen mode and you're able to vote. Okay. We also will be fielding questions. So if you have any questions, you can type those into the question bar. And you can also put comments in there, running commentary. You can make fun of me. You can be like Jeff Erdman, my old friend from college, that says there's no crying in baseball. Notice that there were no tears, Jeff, in that picture. There was just a very, very sad grown man. But no tears were shed because agreed, no crying in baseball. Thank you for that. So if you want to shoot some questions, feel free to go ahead and do those there. I usually try to, so that I don't get distracted during and trying to do too many things at once, I will answer all those questions at the end. Again, sometimes the questions, depending on how many we have, will go a little bit over 1 hour. And so I will answer all of the questions. It just may be over the hour. If you have to leave and go to another meeting, or if you've just had way too much of me to handle and need a break, feel free to get back on the YouTube channel and watch the end where I answer all of the questions. So feel free to do that. We've also got a few videos that I want to share with you today that we're going to try that out. We've been a little hit or miss. For those of you that have come to all of these, you'll know that most weeks the videos work and 1 week it didn't. So we'll see how that works today. I also have a handout that you can download that later on I'll be talking about what that is when we get to the portion in Evidence Defeats Doubt about exhibits. But there I have included a handout so you can see an example of what an exhibit is. But we'll go ahead and jump right in to talking about knowing your audience. Now, this is a really important thing that I think oftentimes is overlooked by presenters, at getting to know who your audience is. Okay, and it's interesting because, especially when we're going in and talking to non-technical people, we don't really know a lot about them. One thing that I like to do, this is just kind of a tip that I've picked up over the years. It took me a while to learn this, but before I even go to the place and before I get to the venue and before I'm even there, I like to look at a few things and ask questions, right? I encourage you to be curious and ask questions. If someone invited you to come in and speak, right? And whether that's at a city council meeting, a planning commission, an open house, at a school, whatever it is, ask questions. Learn a little bit and find out who's going to be there, what it's going to be like. Questions like, how many people will there be? That's a very important one. Am I going to be speaking to 5 people or am I going to be speaking to 500? The message is going to be a lot different. So while you're preparing your presentation, you need to know some of these questions, like how many people? Also, what's their background? Tell me a little bit about the people that will be there. Are a lot of them from the area? Have they lived in this city a long time? What do they do for a living? A lot of those things can really impact and affect what your message is and your delivery. And also, when we get to the evidence defeats doubt part, what type of tactics we're going to use to speak to them better. What education level do all of these people have? Are they going to be able to understand basic engineering concepts, or do I have to go down even further to a lower level of understanding? For instance, if I'm speaking to a junior high school about kids that are interested in engineering, I'm going to treat that a little bit differently than I would speaking to a high school kids about engineering, or even a college class about a pre-engineering class or something. So find out where they are, what's their education level, what are we going to do? One of the most important things that I think is often overlooked is, what is their objective? What is our audience's objective? What does the audience really want to get out of this? Because if we don't know what their objective is, how are we going to be able to make sure that we're providing that to them, right? And lastly, and this is one that I always ask because I just want to know what I'm getting myself into. so it's a little bit self-serving, but will they be hostile? How hostile will this crowd be? Are they going to be open-minded and receptive, or have they already made their mind up and they're upset with what I'm going to tell them? And no matter what I say is going to persuade them and convince them otherwise. Okay, so think for just a moment, who do I present to most often? So think about that for a second. We're going to do a poll question in just a moment, but think about who you're presenting to most often. All right. When I was doing presentations a lot, and I do presentations now, obviously, and I'm mostly presenting now to engineers. But before, when I was in consulting or other times when I was speaking at schools and different things and job shares and that, this is who I was mostly presenting to. My typical audiences were like elected officials, either city councils or county commissions or even the state legislature. That was very, very common when I was the Morgan County engineer. Every other week I was presenting to elected officials. And some of them had varied backgrounds. Maybe one was an insurance salesman. And so he was really interested in risk. Another one was a stay-at-home mom. So she had different needs. Her concerns were children and parks and how this is going to affect, traffic and schools and all of that. And maybe someone else had a background in construction, and so they could understand a little bit more of the engineering side of things. So that's a really interesting one with elected officials because they can come from all different walks of life. Planning commission is kind of a similar thing. I made a lot of presentations to planning commissions, and maybe some of you do as well. Same thing. These were appointed people, appointed by typically mayors or city or county commissions, and they can come from different different walks of life, different backgrounds. Obviously, if you're giving open houses to talk about a project, you're doing public involvement and you're speaking to the general public and you're doing a presentation there, that can be really wild on where people are coming from, depending on how big the open house is. That was always an unknown. We don't know how many people are going to show up. We don't know what they're going to be, how their temperament is, but it's good to ask those questions. And then I mentioned before as well, students. I would speak with students also. Let's go ahead and do a quick poll. I'm just curious to see, who do you present to the most? So I'm going to launch this poll now. Remember to take yourself out of full screen mode so that you can vote. But who are you voting to? And if it's other, I'm curious to know who other would be. If you're presenting to someone and you mark other, why don't you go ahead and just shoot that, type it into the question box. I just want to know who that would be with the other one. I'm just curious to see what else. Looks like most of you as city engineers are probably presenting to elected officials, and that's kind of what I was expecting. Another pretty decent group of you with general public, speaking at maybe open houses or doing public involvement and going out on projects and meeting with folks. So I'm going to go ahead and close and share that with you. As you can see, about 35% said elected officials, 19% planning commissions, 15% general public, 8% students, 23% other. It looks like other would be my wife, presenting to my wife. Jeff, well done, Jeff Erdman. You must be a heck of a presenter to be able to convince a woman to be with you. So other, Michael Brewer says peers. That's a very good one. I was also thinking as well, like staff members maybe that aren't that don't do, like I used to work in a company where we had like a landscape architect, and so we would have to coordinate and work, and I would have to give him information, but he didn't quite understand the engineering, so I couldn't speak about really technical topics, so I had to kind of figure out ways to work with him on that. It's interesting where Jeff says my wife. That's one where whenever I'm going to give a presentation to somebody, this is kind of a pro tip for you. When I'm going to give a presentation to somebody who is not, who doesn't have a big technical background, I like to talk with my kids and my wife and figure out what parts of my message are confusing to them and which parts are really easy to understand. And it's a really good kind of check on where they're at and what they do, like, how they're figuring out, okay, yeah, that makes sense. We know that doesn't make sense. And then I have to tailor my message a little bit more. Brent Schofield, my friend from up in Canada, tuning in here, he says meeting with consultants. Brent does what I do with technical marketing. So he's going in and he may have a lot of experience in the concrete pipe world, but sometimes consultants, that may be 1 or 2% of their daily job and what they do. So yeah, we have to tailor and change our presentation to people who don't have the technical expertise that we do. So when I say presenting to a non-technical audience, that doesn't mean that we're presenting to non-engineers. If my area of expertise is water resources, and I'm speaking to a group of engineers whose area of expertise are structural engineering, then that would be a little bit different. There's a different approach that I have to take because they don't have the same expertise that I have. Well, they may have the same basic understanding of engineering principles and technical principles, but you still have to kind of tailor your presentation that way. Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much. We're going to go ahead and move. Oh, there was one more, I think, that said on that questions. Let me pull that one up there. Nope, I think I covered them all. Okay, great. Well, let's move on now to the best presentation, one of the best presentations that I've ever heard. And for those of you that attended or graduated from BYU recently, you may recognize this gentleman. All right, this is Dr. Rollin Hotchkiss. And Rollin Hotchkiss, I've gotten to know him really well over the years, but the first time I met Dr. Hotchkiss was at a presentation that he gave at the Floodplain Managers Conference, the UFSMA, Utah Floodplain and Stormwater Management Association Conference, and this was the one down at Bryce Canyon. In fact, he had such an impact on me. We got to talking, and we were discussing and meeting, and we ended up going down and taking pictures that evening. Randy, Dr. Hotchkiss, and myself, and we went and took pictures at night in Bryce Canyon, and we would do extended exposure with flashlights and trying to paint the rocks, and we got some really cool things. If you ever get a chance, if you know Dr. Hotchkiss, ask him to see some of his pictures. Randy has some great pictures too. I'll have to have him share some of those with us. Anyways, Dr. Hotchkiss, the reason that this presentation was so potent and so good, and I loved it so much, was that when I walked into the class, about 10 minutes before the class started, he was in shaking the hand of everybody. Now, obviously, post-COVID-19, this wouldn't work as well, but he was shaking the hand of everybody and asking them, what would you like to learn today? What do you want to get out of this presentation? What are you hoping to pull from this? What are you hoping to learn? And I watched him as he moved from one person to the next. And he did this for the 10 minutes before the class started. And he even did it for about 5 minutes after the class started. Jeff Erdman, who I know is on the line, he may remember this because I remember him going through and asking. He asked Jeff some questions, but he would say, oh, great, yeah, we're going to talk about that today. Good. Or, you know what, that might be a little beyond the scope of what we taught you. I'll try to touch it briefly if we can, but that might be a little bit out of the scope, but talk to me afterwards. Let's see what we can do to get you some answers to that. It was really interesting because he was building this level of trust and rapport with his audience before he even started. Now, what he was talking, and I gotta admit, Dr. Hotchkiss is brilliant in hydraulics and hydraulic modeling, and we had him come and teach an 8-hour class on hydraulic modeling, and he is just brilliant, very smart. So when I say he was talking to a room of mostly engineers, but I can speak for myself, I am not nearly at the technical level that Dr. Hotchkiss was. Maybe some of you on the call would have been, and I'm you guys are way beyond where I am, but it was amazing to see this man who had such technical expertise, wanting to connect with his audience. And that connection was so important. And it showed the audience that, look, I'm hearing you, I'm listening to you, and I'm going to tailor my message to make sure you get something out of it. It really resonated with me. It changed the way that I approached presenting. And that was a couple of years ago. And it's like I say, it really made me change the way I think about presenting to an audience, not just a technical audience, but non-technical, and everybody talking to them beforehand, finding out what their goals are and their objectives, what they want to get out of it. It's a brilliant presentation by a brilliant man. And that leads me into the next part of this presentation, which is about building trust and rapport and how we can do that quickly. Because unfortunately, we don't always have a chance to do that like Dr. Hotchkiss did. If you can talk to people beforehand and get to know them and find out what their concerns are and what they're worried about so you can make sure you tailor your message to them, that's important. However, if you're going to do that, please, please, please make sure that you actually address their concerns in your presentation. Imagine if Dr. Hotchkiss had walked up to everybody and said, "What do you want to learn today?" "Oh, great, thank you. What do you want to learn today? What do you want?" And then didn't talk about any of that. I mean, imagine what you would feel if he asked you your opinion and, "Well, I would like to learn about this concept." "Great, thank you for sharing." And then he doesn't talk about it at all and doesn't even acknowledge what anybody said. And he went through and did his own presentation. What he did that was great is he said, I heard most of you want to hear about this. Some of you said this. Some of you said that. So we're going to prioritize that. I'm going to jump around in my slides a little bit, so it might be a little bit messy in the transitions, but that's okay because I want to make sure you get what you want to hear out of it. And it was great. It was a great presentation. And so I really loved that. And that's a great way to build that trust and rapport. However, sometimes we're not going to have those opportunities. So I want to give you kind of a little life hack and a cheat code here on how you can build trust and rapport quickly. And that is through storytelling, the fine art of storytelling. If you are a good storyteller, then you're going to be able to you're going to really be able to connect with people. And I'll tell you why, because there's some science behind it, and we'll get to that in a moment. All right, so storytelling here. This is a great quote by Jonathan Gottschall. Jonathan Gottschall is a professor at Washington and Jefferson University in Pennsylvania. He is an author. He teaches literature at that university, and he is just brilliant when it comes to literature and the effect that it has on the populace. This quote: "We are, as a species, addicted to a story. Even when the body goes to sleep, the mind stays up all night telling itself stories." I mean, I don't know about you, but I get goosebumps when I think about that. Just how great stories, what a good story can do. So my next question would be, what is a good story worth? All right, think about that. What is the value of a really, really good story? Can you put a dollar amount on it? People have tried, and I'm going to go ahead and show you what I think a good story is worth. Some of the best stories that I've ever seen or heard or read came from 3 different groups, okay? 3 different companies. The first one, Marvel Cinematic Universe, Marvel Studios, Marvel Comics. Great stories. Stories of triumph, stories of struggle, stories of overcoming obstacles, stories of heroes and villains, good versus evil. Great stories, okay? What is Marvel worth? Well, when Disney purchased Marvel in 2009, they paid $4.24 billion with a B dollars. The Marvel Cinematic Universe gross earnings, $22.5 billion for 23 movies. 23 movies, $22.5 billion gross. Wow. Crazy. That is amazing. That was in 2009. In 2012, Disney purchased Star Wars. They purchased Lucasfilm and the Star Wars franchise there. They paid $4.05 billion with a B dollars for the Lucasfilm franchise. The Star Wars franchise is estimated to be worth $70 billion. And they purchased Lucasfilm. In 6 years, Disney was able to make their money back in the profit from that buy from Lucasfilm. So that is amazing. So just between Marvel and Star Wars, we're over $8 billion that Disney was willing to pay for a good story. But what's crazy about that is that isn't even the most that Disney paid for a good story. Sometimes we forget with the Marvel and the Star Wars and the impact that that's had on movies and film and cinema. Sometimes we forget that in 2006, Disney paid a whopping $7 billion for Pixar in 2006. That's almost 15 years ago dollars, $7 billion. So Disney valued good storytelling of Pixar, Marvel, and Lucasfilm to be over $15 billion is what they valued and what the price tag that they put on a good story. So keep that in mind. Good storytelling is very, very valuable. Okay, so why storytelling? Why do I believe that storytelling is a very quick way to build rapport and trust with an audience, especially an audience that maybe doesn't have the technical background that we have? Well, as I mentioned before, it is rooted in science. Okay, storytelling is a very basic connection of cause and effect. So-and-so did this, this happened. That's what storytelling is. We are able to make that connection, and we are able to help other people see that connection and understand at a deeper level that connection of cause and effect. Studies have shown that 2/3, 65%, 2/3 of all human interaction are done through storytelling. If you spend any amount of time with me, you know that I am the one that is bringing that curve up, because I would argue that 95% of all my human interaction is done through storytelling, because I love to tell stories. I absolutely love it. Okay. And what storytelling does is it turns ideas into our own experience. Okay. And it's relatable. People can understand a story much better than they can understand a very technical concept. Okay. So if you can tell a story, it also helps you feel the same emotions. And I'll tell you why. Brains are hardwired for storytelling. And there was a study done by Yuri Hassan at the University of Princeton back in 2012. And what Yuri Hassan found out was that when we tell stories to others that have helped us, like, for instance, things that have shaped our way of thinking or shaped us emotionally, or had a profound impact on us, we can actually have that same emotional response, or elicit that same emotional response and that same effect on others that are listening to our story. So the brains of a person telling a story and the brain of a person listening to a story can actually synchronize and create this, what Yuri Hassan calls is this neural coupling, right? And I've got a quote here that I'll read from you from Dr. Hassan. And he said the study, what happened was this woman was speaking in a different language and people didn't understand what they were saying, and there was no brain activity that was interconnected at all. And he said, but when the woman spoke English, the volunteers in the study understood her story and their brains synchronized. When she had activity in her insula, an emotional brain region, the listeners did too. And when her frontal cortex lit up, so did theirs. And this is the important part that I want to put extra emphasis on for everybody here. By simply telling a story, the woman could plant ideas, thoughts, and emotions into the listener's brains. Okay? By simply telling a story, the woman could plant ideas, thoughts, and emotions into the listener's brains. Think about that. Think about the power that you can have with a story. By telling a well-crafted, well-delivered story, you can plant ideas, thoughts, and emotions into listeners' brains. I know one person that would be very, very concerned about this idea, and that would be Jack Donaghy from one of my favorite sitcoms ever, 30 Rock, because one of my favorite lines, I should say, that Jack Donaghy said was this one: "I never sleep on planes. I don't want to get incepted." Obviously making reference to the movie Inception, where they plant ideas into a man's brain while he's asleep on an airplane. Anyways, fascinating that we can have that impact and that power and that control to plant those ideas into people's brains. I go back to Pixar. When I learned about this from Dr. Hassan and I started thinking about it, I thought back to all the times my wife makes fun of me all the time because of this. But and Jeff, you can comment on this and see if there's any crying in this. But I know there's no crying in baseball, but there are certain things that make me cry every time. Okay, number one, if it's a movie, and these are in movies, if it's a movie about a dad, like a father and a son, I cry like a baby. And that happened ever since I watched the movie Life is Beautiful, the Italian movie that was released in 1999, won an Academy Award for Best Picture. Go look it up if you haven't seen it. It's about Italian Jews during the Holocaust. Oh, just gets me every time. I don't know if I can even keep talking about it. I'll start tearing up here. That's one. Another one is a movie about baseball. Movies about baseball, I don't know what it is. They just hit me emotionally, and the story they're telling, they are able to elicit these emotions in me. I don't know, and I just start crying. So if you were to take a movie about baseball and dads, like The Rookie or Field of Dreams, oh man, good night. I'll cry for days. Anyway, the third one that I cry every time is Pixar movies. It doesn't matter which Pixar movie, I'm going to cry. I'm just going to tear up. It's because they are so powerful at telling these stories and evoking these emotions. And when I learned about the study by Yuri Hassan about how, your brains would synchronize with the story, it 100% happens with me. My mind is extremely susceptible to a very good story. And that's why I love hearing good stories. I love telling stories. I love sharing experiences. Like, it's just so much fun. Anyways, enough about me. But that story to tell you about the Pixar and that's one thing that I wanted to point out in why storytelling is so important and so valuable. You are able to share personal experiences and let the audience see you at a vulnerable point, right? I'm sharing something that might be a little embarrassing about myself, but I'm making myself vulnerable to you as the audience. And I don't know what your response is, but I'm assuming that it's similar to what my response is when I hear someone share something that makes them look and appear vulnerable to me. It's that I see, okay, this is someone who has similar experiences to me. This is someone who is human, who is real, who has emotions and feelings. And I've just humanized that element of that. Even though we're not even in the same room, we might be miles and miles apart or even in a different country, right? I'm hoping that maybe by telling that story, you learned a little something about me and you were able to connect with me on a slightly deeper level. But that's what stories can do, is help us do that. This is a quote by Seth Godin, who is a CEO and an executive officer of a couple of .com businesses. He's written, I want to say, 7 books, great author, but he talks a lot about marketing and stories and the importance of that. But this quote says, marketing is no longer about the stuff that you make, but about the stories you tell. And the reason I love this quote is because of an experience I had with my father-in-law. Now, my father-in-law is a brilliant computer programmer. He was the computer programmer for the White House back in the 80s and 90s when he moved back to Washington, D.C. from Clearfield. And my wife moved back there when she was about 2 years old, grew up back there, lived back in D.C. for 14 years, attended all sorts of White House functions because he was working there for the White House, got to meet Bush Sr., the Clintons, Bush Jr., went to balls at the White House, did all this stuff. I have to constantly remind her that her childhood is not normal, that very few children were ever given the opportunity when they were 12 years old to say, hey, there's an event at the White House tonight. Do you want to go have dinner with the president, or do you want to play your softball game? And she chose to play in a softball game. Like, that decision isn't given to many children. So I have to constantly remind her that. But my father-in-law, he's a brilliant computer programmer, moved back to Utah, wrote computer programs for a company that was selling them to multi-level marketing companies in Utah County. And so after a while, he was recruited to come and work for some of those companies. And so he, at one point, was I want to say the chief technical officer for Zango company. He was one of their vice presidents, but he was invited with a couple of other people who worked there to teach a class at the Utah Valley University in their business program. And it was a new class they were offering for multi-level marketing to explain what the concept is behind it and how they work and how they're successful. And he was kind of telling me some of these things that he was teaching these students, and he said something that resonated with me and stuck with me. He said, it's funny, the most successful multi-level marketing companies, and when you think about what people are doing to join these, and you know, some people are spending a lot of money to buy into this, he said, it's not the ones with the best product. It's the companies with the best story. They are the ones that are the most successful. And I thought, wow, that is fascinating. You know, it's not the best product. Your product could work, but if you don't have a good story, people aren't going to invest. People aren't going to buy in. People aren't going to make that sacrifice. Really, really intriguing idea that he would teach. So some of you may be saying, oh man, I'm not a very good storyteller. Well, great. I'll tell you what, I'm going to give you 7 techniques on how you can tell a better story. Okay, these are 7 storytelling techniques that I hope can help you be better storytellers. Okay, number 1, immerse your audience in a story. Give details, build it up. Let them, give unnecessary details, right? I'm one that loves to flower things up. I used to always say, never let the facts get in the way of a good story, right? But engulf people. Now, obviously, if you want people to trust you, there's two kinds of storytelling for entertainment and storytelling for a purpose. And if your purpose is to get people to trust you, then obviously you want to be honest and direct and do that. But when I'm just shooting the breeze with my friends and trying to get them riled up with a good story, I'll let the imagination flow and tell a good story. My kids love a good bedtime story, and I'll tell them about the time I met a dragon, or I was abducted by pirates and taken out onto the Great Salt Lake to pillage all of the other ships out. I mean, they love all these crazy stories I tell them about my childhood. none based in fact whatsoever, but they enjoy them. Okay, but immerse your audience in the story. Okay, tell a personal story, right? Make it personal. Tell us about something that happened to you, or if it didn't happen to you, I always will say, well, this happened to someone that was very close to me, right? Someone that I know, right? But make it personal. Tell how you felt about it, right? Make it be emotional for you, so that they can feel, as Dr. Hassan said, we can bridge that, make that neural coupling, and they can feel the emotions you feel. All right. We want to create suspense. All right. Go and watch the comedians in that on Netflix if you get a chance. I love watching comedy because their storytelling and their comedic timing. One of the best storytellers that I've ever heard is Rob Mulaney. He's a comedian and he just tells these phenomenal stories. And he just is so good at it that it's like, oh my gosh, he is so brilliant at these stories. And it's because he builds suspense and he has pauses at the right time. And I've tried to mimic some of these comedians when they're telling stories for a full hour. Like I've studied them and learned what they're doing to also bring characters to life. Tell me what they look like. Tell me how they felt. Tell me what they were doing. Give them emotions. Bring them to life. All right. Show, don't tell. That's important. Make them see what you're seeing through the details. Build up to a star moment. Now, a star moment is a something they'll always remember moment, a star moment, something they'll always remember. All right. And the key is to always end with a positive takeaway. There's someone that I'm very close with that just does not know how to tell stories. And it's very interesting to find them or to listen to them tell stories. Like they'll say to me, they get that there's, a story is typically done in 3 acts. 1 is introduction to characters. 2 is you identify the problem. And 3 is resolution. And this person constantly gets caught in the phase 1 and 2 portion of that, act 1 and 2. Sometimes, if he's lucky, he'll make it out of act 1 and get to act 2. Very rarely do I ever get the resolution that I need in an act 3 of storytelling. So an example of a story that he told me one time was this. He said, yeah, there's a guy I work with, and he got this new dog, this new hunting dog. And he was really excited. And so, last weekend he took him out hunting. And I said, oh, okay, and he said, and what? Well, and what happened? Well, did they catch anything? He's like, I don't know. I didn't ask him. I said, so that's your story. He got a hunting dog and he took him hunting. There's no, okay, that's it? Yeah, that's it. I just wanted to tell you that. Well, thank you for telling me that. I don't know this person and I don't know why I should care that he got a hunting dog and took him hunting. Would have loved to have heard how this could relate to me in some way, but that's the problem. Anytime this person tells me stories, it never ends with a positive takeaway, and it frustrates the heck out of me. It never builds up to a star moment, although it is something I will always remember, the inability to tell good stories. Anyways, so that's the storytelling techniques. Let's do another poll here. I've got another poll. Let's see here. All right. Because we were talking about it. Actually, no, we're going to do that one in a minute. I want you to rate yourself as a storyteller. I just want to know how you think you stack up. Are you poor, fair, good, great, or an exceptional storyteller? Looks like a couple feel like they're exceptional storytellers. We ought to get together and just tell stories sometime. All of you great and exceptional storytellers. Let's do that. Let's get together and just share amazing stories. Okay. Just a couple more seconds here. We'll collect here. Okay, I'm going to share that with you. It looks like, for the most part here, fair to good. Half of you say you're a good storyteller. That's good. That's good. Fair. That's excellent. I'm excited for that. So hopefully those of you that said poor, fair, good, or great, I'm hoping that those 7 storytelling techniques, you can remember those, and maybe that will help you maybe step up to that next level. Like I say, watch comedians or watch other storytellers. And see what they do, see what some of their techniques are, because a good story is extremely valuable. Okay, let's go back to sharing my screen. Oh, no, we're going to do one more poll, actually. I just want to know what I'm dealing with here. Of these 3, which is your favorite? Pixar, Marvel, or Star Wars? Who do we got in the crowd today? Oh, it's even. That's pretty good. Someone looks like one's pulling away though. Okay, I'm watching as the results come in. This is fun. All right, we'll go a couple more seconds here. We'll see. And I will say this. That's a tough decision because even, I don't know how I would choose between the three, but probably pretty similar to what happened there. I think my number one would probably be, I think it's probably Star Wars because of the impact that it had on me as a kid. I'm going to share that with everybody so you can see. 46% said Pixar, 36% Marvel, 18% Star Wars. All are fantastic. But anyways, just wanted to see what we got going there. Just have a little bit of fun there. Okay, so let's get back to our presentation. So we've talked about knowing our audience and asking those questions, trying to figure out and tailor our message to them. We talked about building trust through storytelling and some storytelling techniques on how we can humanize our message and get them to see us at our vulnerable so that we can build trust, rapport, and also help them feel the things that we want them to feel. So now let's get into our last concept, and that is the using evidence and how that works in our presentation. So using evidence is essential to an effective presentation. All right. This part of the training is something that I gleaned from, as I mentioned before in the presentation, a Dale Carnegie presentation that I attended, a Dale Carnegie training, I should say, that I was able to go to. And it was really, really interesting to hear them talk about these different concepts and ideas. And so I just wanted to share this with you because I think there's some really valuable stuff there that we can learn from it. So when we're looking at evidence and using evidence, we need to ask ourselves some questions, or people will be asking these questions of us. For instance, when you're giving a presentation, you're trying to persuade somebody either to use your product, use your services, approve a pipeline, allocate funding for something. We are in the sales business, right? Whether it's, you're on a date, you're in sales and marketing. Whether you're, trying to convince someone to marry you, you're in sales and marketing. Whether you're trying to get them to come to your side of the reasoning or your belief system, you're in sales and marketing, right? And so people are always going to ask these questions. Why should I listen to you? That's kind of the most important one, right? Why should I listen to you, first of all? If you can convince them to listen to you, you're well on your way. The second one is similar, but different enough that it's very important. So why should I believe you? So you've got them listening to you, but now they're questioning, saying, why should I believe you? What do you have? What's your credentials? Why are you credible, right? And then the last one that you get asked a lot is very common, especially when you're giving technical information to a non-technical crowd. Who besides you says this? Interesting. Who besides you says this? Those are great questions. So in order to overcome some of those questions and to be able to provide good information to our people, especially that non-technical crowd, I'm going to introduce you to this concept. Evidence defeats doubt. I briefly touched on this in our effective presentation techniques webinar that we gave, I want to say about a month ago, 3 or 4 weeks ago. And so I briefly touched on this, but this is a great thing. This defeats, it stands for demonstrations, examples, facts, exhibits, analogies, testimonials, and statistics. So we're going to go through each of these so that I can tell you what they are, what they mean, and when you should be using them. And I'm hoping that as we go through these, you can see, okay, and I want you to think for a second, say, okay, I've got this city council I've been working with, or this open house coming up, or someone that I have to present to, or even someone in my office, or something that really isn't buying into my ideas and these things. As we go through these, think about which ones of these tactics would be helpful for you and which would be beneficial for you to use to get them to see your way of thinking, right? So we'll go through each of these. So number one is demonstrations, all right? This is the first one. Just like in storytelling, show, don't tell. That's the whole concept behind a demonstration, right? So think about an infomercial, right? You've got this infomercial. I remember, my parents used to buy things off of, from infomercials where they go to the fair and they'd see someone, doing their, the miracle blade or whatever it was, that real great knife that would cut through cut through a metal, and then it would cut through a rubber boot, and then you could still cut your tomatoes. I think it was Ron Popeil and Ron Co with his knives and his food dehydrator. But I grew up on those, watching those, late night, watching all these infomercials, and that's the thing. They're giving you the demonstrations. They're showing you how it works, right? For me, in my line of work, I can sit and tell you how pipe is manufactured and how we make concrete pipe and all the benefits of it. But to get you into a plant tour and show you is going to be more potent, because you can see it, you can smell it, you can hear it, you can feel it. There's emotion attached to that. It's, that's going to be a little bit more. I can tell you how we load these pipes. I can tell you that, oh yeah, we put all this hydraulic press on it and we load this pipe and then it cracks. Or I can show you, I can bring you into the plant tour and do an actual demonstration of the deload and show you that deload test. And it's going to be much more meaningful and powerful for you to see it firsthand. All right. I've got a video here. Remember a couple of weeks ago, we were talking about installation. And for those of you that were here, for those of you that aren't, I'm going to give a quick little recap. But we were talking about the differences in installation. At the very end, we compared a contrast, because we were talking about installing concrete pipe. And we talked about the importance of building up to the spring line of pipe, which is that very middle of the pipe, because the pipe itself is a structure. And so you only have to build up the spring line, because the pipe itself will hold that structure and that load, and everything will be fine. So what I did is I have a little demonstration that I want to share with you here, and I'm hoping this video works, and I hope you can hear the audio, because it's me and my son. And I was explaining when we install concrete pipe to him, and he was asking me questions about my job, and I started explaining the differences between concrete pipe and flexible pipe, like a metal or a plastic pipe. And so I showed him this little demonstration, and then he helped me so that we could film it so I could show it to you today. But we're going to try this here, and we're going to see if this plays for us and if it works. So this is a little demonstration that shows when you have flexible pipe, why you need to build the soil envelope all the way around it and up above the pipe, so that it can bridge that pipe and have a structural envelope around it. And you can't install and build plastic pipe the same way you do concrete pipe. And this is why. Okay, so hopefully you guys could hear that and see it and everything. But anyway, that was a little demonstration that I did with my son. There's another demonstration that we did at a plant tour that was really helpful. We were having some issues with hairline cracks, and inspectors rejecting those hairline cracks. Now, if it's a structural crack, absolutely, we want to make sure that we get those repaired and replaced if necessary. But we had people that were saying to me, well, we're paying for perfect pipe, and I had to try to explain to these cities and these inspectors that within your spec, hairline cracks are acceptable, and this is why. And they didn't quite understand, and so I wanted to show them why, and I invited them out to a plant tour, and we talked about autogenous healing. Now, autogenous healing is a process that is very chemical heavy, very chemistry heavy. It's an extremely technical concept, and basically what it comes down to that is when there's water or moisture in the pipe, the concrete itself extrudes calcium hydroxide which is then converted to calcium carbonate or limestone when it's exposed to the atmosphere. So it's an interesting process, but it happens and it fills in those cracks and it seals those cracks and it creates a white effervescence. So we did a little experiment with a 24-inch concrete pipe, a class 3 pipe. We cracked it, but we cracked it beyond hairline. We actually took it to ultimate. So a hairline crack is anything that's 1/100th of an inch or smaller. We took this one to a 5/100th of an inch crack, which is 5 times the acceptable crack width per ASTM C76 spec. Okay. And so what we did is we took both of these, we sealed the bottoms of these pipes. So the one that's closest to the screen that you can see there, you notice if you look down it, you've got this white material here forming. Can you see that? And then over here and over here and there. This is that limestone, that calcium carbonate that has filled up that crack. And so when we first did it and we sealed it, we filled this up with water and let it stay in there for 3 weeks. Okay. And after 3 weeks, it started to seal itself. It created that calcium carbonate and it what's called autogenously healed, and it filled in that crack. Now, keep in mind, we cracked it well beyond what the acceptable cracking rate is, right? And so it still was able to heal after 3 weeks. We filled this up at the beginning of our plant tour, right, that morning, and we noticed that it was still leaking just a little bit, still leaking after 3 weeks, at a rate of about 1 inch per 2 hours, so about a 1/2 inch an hour. So every 2 hours, I made a mark and it went down 1 inch in 2 hours. Now, the other one that we filled up that we hadn't put any water in until that morning, we sealed it and we measured how much it was dropping. And what happened was this pipe was leaking at a rate of 2 inches per minute. So one was leaking a 1/2 inch per hour, and this one was leaking 2 inches per minute. We had to keep the hose. You could see the hose in it. We had to keep the hose on low so that we could keep it filled up, or else it would just leak out the entire way. And so this was a way that we could do a demonstration with inspectors and with engineers and show them how autogenous healing works. Okay, so that's kind of fun and exciting. That was a great demonstration, and it was really valuable for them to see it firsthand instead of just hearing about it from us. Okay, an example. An example is basically a story. All right, so I've told some stories today. Those are examples. In fact, what I just showed you there of our demonstration was obviously an example of a demonstration. So by telling you the story of our demonstration, it went from demonstration to an example. Right? So that is basically it. What you want to make sure you're telling in this story when we're looking to persuade or use this evidence to defeat doubt, okay, you want to ask the following questions and answer these following questions. Who are they? What was the problem? What did they do to fix it? How did they fix it? And lastly, how did it turn out? What was the ending on that? Give them a resolution so that they know. So if you're trying to sell your product, you tell a story of, oh yeah, this thing failed. It cost them all this money. They then used our product and they haven't had a problem in 50 years or whatever it is, right? So something like that. You want to make sure that they know how it turned out. Okay. This is an example that I use sometimes when I'm talking about the difference between structure versus liner. This is the Metrodome. This is an air-supported structure. It's supported by positive air pressure, requires 250,000 cubic feet per minute of air to keep it inflated. It has 20 fans that are 90 horsepower each. It has 2 layers. One's 1/32 of an inch, one's 1/64 of an inch fiberglass. It's an acoustic layer. There's a gap in between that they heat up to melt all the snow. There are 10 acres of fabric used on this building. It's a pretty amazing thing, and it's a cool concept. But the idea was that it would displace any snow or anything on top of it. Unfortunately, in the first 5 years of operation, it deflated 4 times because of too much loading on top of it. And in 2010, it definitely had an issue. We've got a little bit of time here, so I'm going to show one more. I'm going to show another video because this is a lot of fun. I like this video, so we'll watch this video if it plays. All right, so that happened in 2010. That's one that I like to use to show that if our load exceeds what we can handle structurally, we're going to have problems with our pipe. So, all right, facts. Let's talk about facts. Okay, facts have two key components to facts. One, they are verifiable and undisputable. All right, that's the key there. Can they be verified or can they be disputed? All righty. Last, how would you use the fact? How are you going to use it? Ask yourself that. Like, if I have a fact, how am I going to use it? Whenever I think of facts, I think of two things. One is this scene from The Office when Jim says to Dwight, fact, bears eat beets. Anyways, I love that scene. Just wanted to share that with you. Okay, let's talk facts here. For instance, RCP will always last 100 years. While most people in my industry would love to believe that, that is not a fact. It is not verifiable and it is not undisputable. There are a lot of things that go into effect there, right? How it was manufactured, how it was installed is the big one. If it's installed poorly, then it may not last 100 years. These are designed to last 100 years, but it relies on a human element there. Now, a fact, if I want to show you how concrete pipe has a long design life, here's a fact I could use. If we go back to our second week of webinars a month and a half ago, the City Creek storm drain pipe was installed in 1910, and some portions are still in use today. That is a fact. All right. Okay, we'll move on. We've only got about 3 minutes left, so I'm going to skip my So I Married an Axe Murderer video that talks about facts in the paper when she talks about weekly world news. So go back this weekend and watch So I Married an Axe Murderer in honor of that, where she claims that the pregnant man gives birth is a fact, and that's why she reads the weekly world news and refers to it as the paper. Anyways, okay, so an exhibit is like a demonstration, but it's static. Okay, they're like diagrams. So, for instance, a deload test is a demonstration. If I told you about the deload test and explained it to you, a situation that we did a deload test, that would be an example. But if I show you the picture of the deload test machine, that would be an exhibit. Okay, this is an example of an exhibit. This is a stiffness and strength exhibit that shows the different strengths of pipes and different things. So you can look at that and use that as you see fit. That's the handout that you can download so you can see an example of an exhibit. But these are static, often leave behind things that you want people to see. That would be an exhibit. So some people respond very well to those. Other people respond well to analogies. All right, you're applying your technical concept to something that they are familiar with statements such as "imagine you have a," or "concrete pipe is like." You know, one time I was telling someone about installing, and you have to install, and you've got to follow the manufacturer's guidelines, and you've got to do what they say. And I just, off the cuff told him that I felt like, installing plastic pipes sometimes is like a father assembling a bicycle on Christmas, because, he just doesn't follow the instructions, so it causes problems later on and makes it harder to deal with after the fact, And that was when I was telling this contractor, because he was saying, "Oh, that isn't how I install it," and I said, "Well, that's how you're supposed to install it." And he said, "Well, I don't have any problems with it." And I said, "Yeah, I'm sure your kid's bike works just fine too, and you didn't follow the instructions," and built that. But anyways, it was a fun little conversation. This is the cake analogy that I always use with my mom, because my mom has a hard time understanding the difference between cement and concrete. So I'm going to use it. I'm going to apply it to something that my mom and I both love, cake. She always says, "Well, the cement, he fell on the cement." I said, "No, it was the concrete." And we as engineers know that drives us nuts. So I always say things like, I tell her, I said, think of it like this. In a cake, you wouldn't call the flour cake. You wouldn't just eat that, right? You have to mix it with other things. You have to mix it with eggs and sugar and water, and then you have to bake it, right? And that's like concrete. You have to mix the concrete with, to make concrete, you have to mix it with cement and aggregate and water and admixtures and other things, and then you bake it, you cure it, and it becomes concrete. And so I take an analogy and liken it to something that she's familiar with there. So cake, so now she doesn't say cement anymore unless she's just trying to really piss me off, which is pretty often. Anyway, testimonials. This is really important as well. A lot of people respond well to testimonials, all right? It provides validation. It shows that there are strength in numbers, and it appeals to those conservative decision makers like your early majority, late majority, and laggards. Some of you may know about the product adoption curve, which shows this is often in technical things like phones or technical products, new computers, phones, things like that. You have those innovators that want to be the first one to have it. And then you've got your early adopters that say, oh, this is a really cool thing. But when you look at about, that accounts for about 16% of the market share. The next 34% is your early majority, and then 34% late majority in your laggards. A lot of the people on the right half of that curve are going to be very susceptible to testimonials because they are waiting to make sure it works. They're waiting to see what success other people have had. And so using testimonials can be really, really good if you have the late majority and laggards and maybe some of that early majority as well. They want to know that it works before they take the plunge. You've seen testimonials like this on websites, but I'm going to do y'all a favor for this weekend and have you have the most fun you've ever had. Go to Amazon and you're going to look up Haribo sugar-free gummy bears, and you're going to read the testimonials of these. All right, I'm going to give you a little preview, but just know there are 266 reviews of this product. 266, and everyone is better than the last. They are amazing. I'm just going to give you a brief overview of what this is about. You read the first 3 words, and you know this is going to be a fun read. Diarrhea while driving. Yeah, these Haribo sugar-free gummy bears give you explosive diarrhea, apparently. This one of the worst days of my life. And my personal favorite, it worked like a charm. Bought these after reading the reviews and decided to prank my cousin. Worked like a charm. So please get on Amazon and read those. You won't regret it. You'll be happy that you did. And lastly, statistics. Okay, we've always heard the quote, there are 3 kinds of lies: lies, damn lies, and statistics. All right, now statistics are facts that use numbers. They are very good for technical, critical thinkers. All right, for example, they have to, again, be verifiable and undisputable. Like Anytown, USA has over 10 miles of concrete pipe in the ground, or Other Town, USA has 4,500 feet of concrete pipe that is over 100 years old. Those are statistics. They are facts, they are verifiable, they are undisputable, and they use numbers. Some recommendations for using statistics. Make sure they are easily understood and relatable to what you are trying to persuade them on. Number 2, make sure they reference a credible source in the audience's eyes. And 3, provide an easy way for them to verify your statistics. Don't just randomly say, oh, this is it. Make sure that they know that they can verify it because it's going to build credibility. So that's the last of our defeats. So what we discussed today were obviously knowing your audience, the importance of knowing that audience and asking questions, getting to know them and practicing on family to see where you can make improvements. The art of storytelling and building rapport and getting emotional responses and making sure that your audience is connected to you on a more like a deeper level. And lastly, we talked about the defeats, the 7 techniques that you can use to persuade people and to your way of thinking. So before we move into questions, I've got a couple more poll questions I just want to know here. So this is one right here. Which defeats evidence works best on you? Which one relates the best to you? And I had to kind of put them together because I can only use 5. Are demonstrations and exhibits, examples, facts and statistics, analogies, or testimonials? Which one works best on you? It sounds like, it looks, yeah, that's kind of what I was expecting. I'll publish these in just a moment here. Okay. We'll take 5 more seconds here. 5, 4, quickly vote, quickly vote, quickly vote. 3, 2, 1. All right. And if you could see, 46% said demonstrations and exhibits, which is very common, hands-on, seeing it firsthand. Examples or stories, people relate to those. Facts and statistics. With engineers, that's very common to have, about 25 to 30% be there. That's very good. Now, I want you to think on this last poll question. Think about the audience that you've been working with or you've been struggling with a little bit. Okay, maybe it's a city council or a planning commission. Maybe you have an open house coming up. I want you to think about this and think about which defeats evidence will work best on that group. Which is going to work best on those that you're working with, those non-technical audiences that you're going to be working with. Oops. Okay, we'll give you a little bit more. About half have voted here. We'll take about 10 more seconds, so quickly vote. 9, 8, Make sure, remember, don't be in full screen mode to vote. You've got to take it off of full screen mode, but here we go. All right, 73%, Okay, keep going up, more votes. 3, 2, 1. All right, we'll share that. Looks like a lion's share. 60% said demonstrations or exhibits. So handouts, doing a little demonstration for them would be good. Examples, yes, would be a good one as well. Examples like your storytelling and that. Facts and statistics might help. Analogies, testimonials. Okay, everybody got one in there, but that's good. I think you'll probably learn that demonstrations are one of the more common ones and the easier to relate and have the larger group relate to. But everybody's different, remember that. So thank you again for taking the time today. I definitely appreciate it. We did go over a few minutes, and I apologize for that, but we had a lot of fun. Hopefully you had as much fun as I did. But this is my contact information. If you have any questions and you want to reach out to me personally, I will take questions now if anybody has any here. And it looks like I don't see any questions. Looks like we answered them all. So I'll stick around for another minute or so and see if anybody wants to add any questions in there. But I think we pretty much answered. Okay, here we go. What is the difference between an example and a demonstration? Great question. So a demonstration would be that you're seeing it happen, right? Like you're watching it, you're observing it. Okay. Now it's hard to give give an example or give a demonstration of a demonstration. So this is a little bit meta and abstract for you, but think of it this way. A demonstration would be if I bring you, and the one that I used in the presentation was if I bring you into the plant and I show you the deload test, right? And I show you us testing that, that would be a demonstration. But if I told you about it in my presentation and talked about the deload test, and I explained to you the process, and I told you a story about how I gave the deload test to a group and explained how we do that, that is an example, right? So the demonstration is where you can actually see it firsthand, hands-on, watching it. That is a demonstration. But the Metrodome was an example because that's an example of a failure, and I'm showing you and I'm telling you about it. So think of an example as maybe a story, and a demonstration as kind of a hands-on thing where you could see it firsthand. And also, when you're doing these, if you're doing a demonstration, it's always good to have a member of the audience come and help you out with those. That's always helpful as well. All right. You're welcome, Jeff. Oh, we've got someone asking the important question, probably the most important question of all. What is the status of the golf tournament? Thanks, Matt. I'm glad you waited until an hour through the presentation to ask your question. It makes it seem like you actually wanted to hear what I had to say so that you could get to this point to ask it. It's a great question. Typically, the golf tournament is held in June, and I have a meeting next week to go over that with our board to talk about what our options are. I met with the golf course last week to talk about it, see if they have any see what we can do, if anything, to make sure that we can have that large of a group come in. So we've got some ideas. We are not planning on canceling it, if that's what you're asking. We may need to postpone it, but we'll be making decisions on Monday, and I will let everybody know probably the following week what the status is, if we're going to move and push forward and try to have it in June. The hard part is with the governor changing, things changing every day from the governor's office and new information and new things, opening new things. It's hard to say that by middle or end of June where we're going to be and if we're going to be able to have this. We do have some dates reserved later in the year in case we have to postpone it, so that's always an option as well. But thank you for reaching out and asking. Any other questions? It sounds like that's it. Thanks again, guys. This will be posted to YouTube later this afternoon and this evening. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me individually. Again, I've been Jason Allen. This is the Mountain States Concrete Pipe Association Pajama Presentation Series. Thank you for taking the time. Thank you for all of your questions. And we will hopefully see you or hear from you again next week. Thanks again, and we'll see you later.